I'm Andy. I'm a Virgo. I'm a presenter. I present stuff. A lot of sport things, Red Bull, cliff diving, strongman to athletics, a lot of fighty stuff. Pro wrestling with WWE, mixed martial arts, boxing, anything with a bit of fisticuffs. I want to work there. Hire me.
And I think everyone wants that big Eureka moment.
They sent me Kurt Angle, a wrestling ring and a costume. And my girlfriend at the time would come back to my flat and I was like, we're putting on wrestling. Looking back, I was like, mate, what are you doing? Michael Cole's like, call me. What? But it was like, have you done any ring announcing? No, like absolutely no ring announcing whatsoever. So I said yes. If standing there and knowing that millions of people were watching.
If things go wrong, there's not always somewhere to hide.
We're about to go into a pay-per-view fight on DAZN. Gee, Vegemite. Banging. Everything's a bit sexy in Australia. Vegemite's the sexy version.
Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Andy with us. Andy, do you just quickly want to introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Andy. I'm a Virgo. I'm Andy Shepherd. I'm a presenter. I present stuff. A lot of sport things. Everything from I've done Red Bull cliff diving to strongman to athletics, and in recent years, a lot of fighty stuff. A lot of combat sports, things like pro wrestling with WWE to mixed martial arts to boxing. Anything with a bit of fisticuffs. That's what I've been doing as of late. But yeah, sports presenter. That's how you can kind of pot me in.
I love this. I'm actually buzzing to sort of get, as I said, loving to hear people's stories. I can't wait to hear yours about how you ended up where you are today. So can we start by sort of where you started versus like where you've got to?
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I don't know how I quite got in myself. It's one of those things, isn't it? You just blag your way in. But no, I suppose I've always loved sport. Sport was good to me growing up. I did like karate and stuff when I was a kid, and then I found athletics, and I was a sprinter, and I loved it. I love competing. I love everything that kind of went with sport, and I learned a lot from it. It taught me a lot of lessons like discipline and sticking at something. And then as I kind of grew up, I was trying to look. You finish uni, you don't know what you want to do. Like I did film and philosophy at uni. I don't know why. I liked films. I love films. Philosophy I'd never even looked at before, but I chose it at uni because I was like, well, I get to watch films of what the other bit's talking bollocks. All right, cool. This sounds great. So when I left uni, I went traveling, and I was like, what do I want to do? Maybe I want to be a presenter because I think presenters get to travel a bit. But how do I do that? I have no idea. So I ended up working. I moved to London and worked at some companies. One of my first jobs was at a production company called Big Talk Productions. They made things like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. So I got to work with a great team there and be around the likes of Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, which is awesome. Just learning about storytelling and so forth. After that, went and just, started trying to blag my way into presenting. I made a show reel. Because again, I think when you're starting out, I kind of got this impression, well, if I go and work at a film company, I'll get discovered, won't I? So someone will discover me.
Yeah. I
didn't know quite how that would work, but I ended up making a show reel, sent that out there, got a very positive response, which was lovely. And then just like any job, you just kind of keep knocking on doors. Ended up doing some travel stuff. Ended up doing, what did I do? Just like, whatever I could kind of get my hand on, like sort of branded stuff. I think the Brit Awards, some like stuff with one of their sponsors and just stuff like that. And then eventually something like Red Bull cliff diving came in, and that was great for me. I worked at SBTV as well. That was a big thing for me, actually, working with Jamal Edwards. He was really good. Did a lot of the sports content for him, and we're developing a whole sports channel with him. And so I think working at SBTV was a great opportunity. And that came about just because I emailed him. Actually, no, I DM'd him. I think I DM'd him. And I thought at that point, SBTV was kind of blown up. And I was like, let me just DM this guy. And I thought, man, his DMs or emails or whatever must be overflowing. And he got back to me in minutes. And we ended up hooking up. And then, and then I just started making content with him. And it went really well. And that kind of opened the doors for me. And so that was a big thing. And then Red Bull cliff diving came along. And then I think the following year, actually a few months later, I got a phone call from someone who I'd done my first ever presenting job for, which was hosting a ring girl competition.
Right.
For, I think, Alex Reed, one of Jordan's ex-boyfriend. He was having a fight.
Yeah.
I don't even know how I got the gig, but I was hosting a competition in a shopping mall about who's going to be a ring girl. And I remember hassling the guys who ran the company after, saying, "Hey, look, can I come and do some backstage interviewing? Can I come and do something for you?" But, there's there's not really anything going on. I kind of put that to rest. Several years later, I get a phone call out of nowhere being like, "Andy, you still out presenting stuff?" I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to come and host the show this week? I was like, "What? Okay." And that was then my introduction into live TV and to mixed martial arts. And that was actually almost 10 years ago now to the date. I got a phone call, so I had to go up 2 days later to go and host this. It was a live TV show. And that was kind of how it all began in the world of combat sports. I've always been a big fan of pro wrestling, a huge fan, a geek fan, hardcore fan.
Yeah.
And the only way I was like, well, MMA's, I quite like it because it's a bit like pro wrestling, but they're actually hitting each other, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I had kind of some reference point to the vibe and that stuff, and I got into it and I loved it. And then that was with Bama. Bama had some great TV deals as well, so it was great exposure for me and great learning process, learning on the job, how to host a live TV show. David Hay was my my co-presenter on that, and I've got a lot to thank him for. He opened a lot of doors for me because not long after that, he had his comeback and he pushed really hard for me to be part of the broadcast teams on that. And then I was actually filming something as a producer backstage at WWE for James Corden's Late Late Show. And this was just after a David Hay show. So my show reel was starting to look a bit like a WWE show. I got some MMA stuff. I got some backstage interviews with David Hay, things. So it was looking a bit, it was shaping out, shall we say.
Yeah.
And I was backstage at WWE, being a geek. An absolute geek.
Yeah.
And got talking to some people there. And I was like, if I was going to send my show reel, I said, if someone was going to send their show reel in to be like a broadcaster for WWE, who would that person be to send it to?
Yeah.
Cut to the chase, 6 months later, they are launching a UK brand and they asked me to be a part of it. So right place, right time. But
crazy.
And that's how WWE kind of sparked up. And then from there, I've been so fortunate. I think it's very easy to, when you're in the midst of something, you're always looking for the next thing.
Yeah.
You're not really looking at, it's hard to sometimes appreciate where you are. You always go, right, what's next?
Yeah.
And I sometimes think back to, when I first started out, sending that first show reel out, being like, getting to work on, all the major British channels, to work on ESPN in the States and all that stuff, and be like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And also thinking back even further to 12-year-old me who was an absolute mark for pro wrestling. I still am. And thinking that, Shawn Michaels was essentially my boss. It's crazy. So it's been a long journey, and the journey's still going, but it's just been a lot about being in the right place, the right time, knocking on doors, and blagging it, if I'm completely honest.
What I love as well is what you've just said as well, highlights perfectly, because I think everyone takes that, that comment of we'll keep your CV on file. It's kind of like everyone says it, but no one actually does it. But what's quite nice is you had the follow-up. Randomly someone calling you one day being like...
I actually need to talk to... I still work with the guy who called me, a guy called David Green. And again, he's given me loads of opportunities over the years, so I have a lot to owe for him. But I actually do need at some point, I don't know if you remember that first phone call, David. How did you remember me?
Yeah.
How did you mean? I don't know if I had just been on Red Bull cliff diving, maybe tuned into that. I don't know. But of all the people that I'm sure are hassling him, where did that come from? So I don't know. It's, but it is. I think sometimes people say, we'll keep your CV on file. And look, I've never worked in HR, but I imagine there's a lot of CVs there, and maybe sometimes that worked. For me, somehow maybe that was the route it worked for. But I think always reminding people, getting in touch. There's a thin line, I think, sometimes between hassling, harassing, and hey, I'm still here. But I've done something.
I think as well. What's interesting is what you just said, and I've had this conversation quite a few times on this pod. It's a very English thing. Because I always relate it to English, so American sales versus English sales. American sales, they'll shove it down your throat. It's like, I'm here. Whereas English, it's kind of like you have to coax them round, make them think it's their idea. And we take the same approach when we're trying to do something ourselves. We'll go, but I don't want to be annoying. I don't want to ask that question. I don't want to do... It's a very English thing.
It really is. And I think I don't know if you suffer from that, but I definitely have suffered from that over the years. Oh, you get in touch with someone. Oh, there's nothing right now.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you're like,
Yeah.
oh man, can I get back in touch? Should I do this? I don't know. It's a real challenge. And
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it is an English thing. I think in America, people maybe celebrate persistence more. Whereas over here, it's sometimes like, what are you doing? Why are you hassling me? I don't know. So yeah, and I think it's something we will have to get over a bit. And I think if you want something, just keep knocking on doors. And it's finding that fine line. I mean, I think it's fine to let people know you're there. Hey, I'm still around if there's an opportunity. Would love to do something with you guys.
Yeah.
I think that's good, but it's definitely a British thing. It's
Yeah.
definitely like, oh, okay, well, there wasn't anything there, so a year later, I'll just imagine there's nothing there. But I get it, man. I get it completely.
Following that, the other thing as well, us English always do, which my American friends and German friends have pointed out to me, we all say sorry. It's always,
I'm sorry.
I'm really sorry. Sorry.
Oh, whoopsie.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's the classic thing. I was at a bar once. Someone went to me, I was like, oh, sorry, can I get another drink? They're like, why are you saying sorry?
Yeah. It's what you're all here for.
Yeah.
It's how we pay for the place you're in. Like, sorry, can I have another drink? No, you should be like, I want 4 more drinks.
Yeah. It's so weird, but then we have that same mentality when we ask for something. And I think how did you get over that? So obviously you say you still battle with it now.
I don't know. I don't know if I fully have, because you still have, let's say you're following up on something. You're still like, oh, is it too soon? But I think also you have to think about the end goals. If you're not knocking on doors, no one's going to open them for you. And I think whatever job you're in, whatever career path you want, let's say you work in IT and there's a company you really want to work for, and you found the HR person or the hiring person there, okay, get in touch. Look, you might get headhunted. Great. But the likelihood is you're probably not.
Yeah.
So put yourself in front of them. If you want to be somewhere, reach out, put yourself there, give them a reason why you should be there. What have you done to deserve it? Why do you think you'd be an asset? Cool. And they might be like, oh, wonderful, come and have a chat. Or they might be like, yeah, there's nothing going on right now. Okay. Yeah. Well, give it a few months, go back in. Have you done something in that interim time that you can remind them of that, makes you an even better asset? Just keep if you want to be somewhere, keep knocking on that door, because they'll either say outright, please stop contacting us. And I'll be honest with you, that is probably unlikely, depending on the kind of area you're contacting.
Yeah.
Or eventually, like, man, you know what? This guy's been emailing me for 18 months. Do you know what? I see he's been doing stuff. I see how he's developed across those 18 months from where he started. Do you know what? Let's get him in for an interview. Or do you know what? Does that role? Should we just at least give him a word? At least he'll stop emailing me. It's the squeaky wheel can get the oil.
Yeah.
I think it's about just how you present it. It's like, hey, I'd love an opportunity. And here's why. Not, look, sometimes, I'm sure we've all had emails from people saying, I want to work there. Hire me. So, okay.
Why?
But why?
Yeah.
But why? What have you done that makes you a good fit? Like, if your job is, I don't know, computer programming, why would you get hired to be a WWE commentator? You know?
Yeah.
It's not an impossible move, but you kind of got to show, well, okay, yes, I'm an IT person, but on my weekends I've gone out and done this, and I've commentated wrestling and this and that. You've got to give them something. You can't go from nothing to that. So I think it's about finding where you want to be, and also reaching out for advice. If you think, okay, I'm not ready for that yet, reach out to someone who perhaps is doing that and ask advice. How did you get there?
Yeah.
What could you maybe recommend for someone in my position? What steps are there? And is there anything at all? And if there's no advice they can give you, at least you're on that person's radar. So maybe when they're in a position of power, of hiring, you're someone there.
Yeah, they can give you the opportunity. It's so true. It's just about asking the question and also doing what you can that's within your control. Because I think we can get too wrapped up in what's outside of our control. Things will happen, like opportunities that you want to be there may not be there. So you've just got to kind of go, okay, it's not there for now, but I'll try and work towards it. But how did that, like with the obviously with your obviously you have a deep love for WWE and wrestling. Where did that come from? And also, can you talk about a bit more of like the starting out in that industry and in that world? Because I can imagine if I play that in my scenario, I would have been fanboying. So my concentration would have been all over the shop. but I don't know whether
Yeah.
that's just me.
Look, I've worked as a producer as well for many years. I used to work at a company called Fullwell 73, and they did a lot of stuff with boy bands, like One Direction. So I
Yeah,
spent a lot of time around boy bands. And during that time, I was always trying to think, what makes boy bands so popular?
yeah,
And girl bands. What is this thing why are these teenage, predominantly girls, going crazy over this thing? And I kind of came to the conclusion that during that period of our lives, puberty, your teenage years, that coming
yeah,
into adulthood time. Look, we've all, there's a lot of hormones. There's a lot of emotions
yeah,
going on.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And look, that's a whole different conversation. There's a lot going on. And sometimes we need things to latch on to live vicariously through, to have our imagine hooked on. So, for example, I think with One Direction, a lot of these girls, in a way, if you dig down into the psyche of it, those boys, or one of those boys or whatever, were their kind of boyfriends. They maybe hadn't got a boyfriend yet, and that's the kind of part of life they were next into. But those
yeah,
boys
yeah,
were like, they were there was something about them that was giving them that, fulfilling
yeah,
that
yeah,
part
yeah,
of their
yeah,
existence.
yeah,
And I think boys, and look, boys can like boy bands, not a problem, but I think if we're generalizing,
yeah,
perhaps boys edge more towards things like sport.
yeah,
Um, and for me, wrestling, like I remember my parents tried for a while to keep me away from it. We didn't have Sky TV as a kid. We didn't have Sky, which WWE was on. And my friend showed me a VHS tape when I popped round to his house once, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" Imagine going back to wrestling in like I don't know, the 90s.
yeah,
These over the top characters,
yeah,
like the cartoon characters. I had never. It just wasn't. I mean, it was just nothing I'd ever seen.
yeah,
And then then WCW was on, I think, ITV at some point. So I got to indulge with that, but it wasn't the same. There's something about the Americana of it, about these larger than life characters, about them being put on pedestals. There's something which just ticked the box for me. Like
yeah,
in some ways I was a very shy child, but otherwise I was a bit of a show off.
yeah,
And I think perhaps there's a box ticked, and I've never actually talked about that, but I think there's something in it that talked to me, like
yeah,
these people who were just out there, the fans were applauding, they were superheroes. And there
yeah,
was something maybe in my psyche to just click with that, as a lot of kids do. I think,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think if you speak to most kids, at some point in their childhood, whether it's a week or a month, a decade, or mere
yeah,
lifetime, they've had a wrestling moment, you know?
yeah, yeah,
Uh, and there was something about wrestling that just stuck with me, even that and like even through university and stuff. Like I remember my girlfriend at the time would come back to my flat, and I was like, "I'll put on wrestling." And it was just looking back. I was like, "Mate, what are you doing?" But I was such a mark for wrestling. I loved it.
But what I love about that is the other thing with that is at the time, because is one of the questions I was going to ask you further down, saying that WWE seemed like it had a big popularity in like 90s, early noughties, then dropped off, and all of a sudden it's had like a massive resurgence. So now I've just got this image of Andy in student digs. And it's at the time would have been quite a geeky, unusual hobby.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all the kids at my school probably got into wrestling because they all had Sky, probably.
Yeah.
They all got into it, and then they started to peter off, and I just didn't. I was just all in. I loved it, and I think there was probably a point in my life where I'd keep across it, but wasn't as full on into it. Mainly because maybe I just didn't have I didn't have Sky, I didn't have the time, but I was always across it. I was always into it, and it was always something that if there's an opportunity to watch it, I was watching it.
Yeah.
Whether wrestling was hot or not hot, it was always it was in my psyche. It's pure theatre. It's a true incredible art form. And then you talk about moving into wrestling. People say, "This is your dream job, working in WWE, like being an announcer in WWE." And I'll be honest with you, no, it wasn't my dream job, because I never even thought it would be a job. Now, I think there were times in my life where, when I thought about WWE, at the time I was a producer, and I'd write sketches, I'd write things, I was like, well, maybe I could be a writer for WWE, but being an announcer for WWE, no, I didn't see an avenue that way.
Yeah.
And it was only, again, so the WWE shoot I did came back because Fullwell 73, like those guys knew I was such a big wrestling fan. One of the highlights of my career at 473 was we did a show called 1D Day. So it was the One Direction boys. They were launching an album, and on YouTube they're doing, I think, like a 7 or 8 hour live entertainment show that those boys were going to host.
Yeah.
And each of us producers were like given, I think, a segment or hours to pull together. And mine, I found out one of the boys, Liam, was a big wrestling fan. So I contacted WWE and they didn't get back to me. So I contacted TNA to be a part of a segment I was putting together. I was writing and trying to come up with. And TNA were great. They sent me Kurt Angle, a wrestling ring and a costume. And I was just like over the moon with that. So full well knew how much of a wrestling fan I was. So when this shoot came out for James Corden show with this parent at the O2, they're like, Andy, you're producing that off your pop. And then honestly, it was only backstage and I was hanging out talking to one of their producers, a girl called Kasama, who's amazing. She was taking care of us. It was only off the back of that, and I was like, do you know what? I just put a new show together. As I said earlier, there was me hosting MMA, anchoring the shows. Then there was me on some boxing shows where I'm anchoring, and then also like backstage interviewing people. Like, you know what? Looks a bit WWE. Why not? Why not just send in? And it was. I really honestly thought nothing would come of it.
Yeah.
And then something did. So it was just the right place, right time.
It's crazy because it's so hard to predict those, and you can't really predict them. And I think everyone wants that big eureka moment. But did it feel like you had the big eureka moment when you landed the role?
No, because I think those big eureka moments, sometimes they happen, but more often than not, like in any job, you're trying to progress. You're trying to, you're chipping away. And I think with WWE, I was hired. I remember talking to Michael Cole. So Tom Phillips, who's still a dear friend of mine, he actually was the one who reached back out to me when I emailed WWE, had some conversations. And I wasn't sure if it was like, look, are they giving me some lip service because I'm a producer from the James Corden Late Show? Is that it? And then a few months later, Michael Cole, the legend, is the one who just messaged me. I woke up to a message from Michael Cole being like, Andy, call me at this time tomorrow.
Okay.
Michael Cole, when you're like, a huge wrestling fan.
Yeah.
And Michael Cole's like, call me. What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he, we were talking, he's like, we're going to launch this UK thing. He's like, have you ever done commentary before? And I'll be honest with you, even I'm a person who'll say yes to 99.999% of things because I think I can figure it out. I can figure it out.
Yeah.
Commentary, even in then, I was like, do you know what? I feel like if I said yes and I did it, I don't think I think I'm going to fall flat on my face.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, I've done. So my answer was yes, I've done some bits, but I was like, a bit.
Didn't commit fully. Yeah.
But it was like, have you done any ring announcing? Now the thing is, no. Absolutely no ring announcing whatsoever. Yeah. But in my head, trying to tell a white lie here, I'd been in a boxing ring.
Yeah.
I'd had a microphone and I'd interviewed fighters or done whatever.
Yeah.
Announcing. So I said yes.
Yep.
Had I bollocks? So, then I got to WWE and again, I was just blagging my way through it. But then the WWE thing, I did that. But then anyone who knows the story of WWE in the UK, we did the UK tournament. And then I think that was in January. There's another show in May, but then nothing happened for like 18 months.
Yeah.
And then we went back in and then I was doing the ring announcing for, I can't remember, about a year or so. And then the commentary thing is something I was pushing at.
Yeah.
Because my experience has been as a broadcaster, as an anchor.
Yeah.
And the ring announcing is great. Honestly, it's a great gig. You get to go out there, you get to work with the crowd, you get to fill in, you get to watch the show. It's such an awesome gig. But I was like, do you know what? I've got a passion for live TV and live broadcasting and the chaos that goes into it. Yeah. I love being in the eye of a storm when shit's hitting the fan. And you've got to you've got to hold it all together. Yeah. You've got to try and not let on how badly this thing's working out behind the scenes. I love that, and I just love the mechanics of a live broadcast, trying to tie things together. The storytelling, I love it. And I was like, okay, I'm looking at WWE, and I love the company. What if I'm going to try and progress here? What do I want to do? Well, I think it's decent commentary. So I was then working with a team there, like again, Tom Phillips, John Quasto, Vic Joseph. They were all helping me out a bunch, sort of trying to prepare. And then when the opportunity came back, I moved into broadcasting. I remember when I got the call to say you're going to be the new lead commentator for NXT UK. That was like, that's when I got, I literally was shivering because that felt like a thing.
Yeah.
But I think that was more like, I mean, because a part of me knew that was maybe that something was going to come because I was, I was working and they were working with me on it. And I think, but that was more like, shit, I've actually got to do this now. And commentary is so difficult. It's so difficult. Is it difficult? No, it's just a skill, I think, that you have to learn. And I was, it's still super, super green. So I knew that was going to be a challenge. So that excited me, but also made me so, so nervous. But to go back to your point, was there a Eureka moment? I don't know. No, because everything's like, was I aware of how fortunate I was? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think if I'd gone from doing Bama to hosting Monday Night Raw, maybe that would have been something. Yeah. But I think obviously the UK thing to begin with was much smaller, and it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew. Yeah. So you're stepping through with it, you know? But yeah, no, I was fully aware of how special it was. But again, with the commentary, I was training for that for, I don't know, 6 or 12 months before I got to sit in that seat. So it's something it's not lost on you, but it's also like, it's not like there you go.
What does that training look like? Because I was literally just thinking, when I think of commentary, I almost, and this is a naive comment, so Andy, it's going to go, yeah, there's more to it than that. But I always think it's like, say what you see. Obviously, you have to have a base level of knowledge to bring that into the conversation as well. But then also you're, bringing alive the action in front of you.
Okay, Charlie, I'll be honest with you, that's probably what I thought. And that's why I thought when Cole said, have you done any commentary before? I was like, I don't And commentary on, again, wrestling is if I've consumed any sport, the most is wrestling over the course of my lifetime. Yeah. But I'll be honest with you, the commentary, it's not something I've paid. It's not something I've broken down and analysed. It just took this great cake and put incredible icing on it. You're watching this great product, a match, and it just made it better. I always wondered why I'd watch some shows and they felt better than others, and in retrospect, a lot of that was the commentary. Yeah. A lot of that was the commentary. Good commentary adds an infinite amount, but I can go back. I can probably dig to my laptop and find some of the early matches, because you say how's the training go? Yeah. It's, hey, I'm going to pull up some matches and I'm going to commentate on them and see what works, what doesn't. Yeah. And in a way, calling a wrestling match is like anything else. You're trying to tell a story. Yeah. But then it's not, because if you're calling a boxing match or an MMA fight or anything else, cool. You need to set the stories. Who are these people? Why do we care? What's at stake? Yeah. And then once you get into the match, you need to tell the story of the fight. Like, is anything, what's happening? Why, this person's focusing on this and this person's getting up a hand because of this. And, you're trying to outline the story, and set it up as best you can for your color analyst to give you the technical stuff. Now, in wrestling, you got to do that. But also remember, it's a soap opera. Wrestling's a soap opera. It's theater. Yeah. So as well as talking about, right, this person is, angry at this person because of this. It's like, no, there's more to fill in. You've got to fill in so many gaps. And Corey Graves had a great quote, and I can't remember it, but it's something about, you're trying to fill in any blanks that there are. So let's say the point of the match where someone does something, but that's pointing to a storyline.
So you're almost like a narrator rather than a commentator.
100%. So in a wrestling match, because there's so much theatrics going on, your job as well, if something is poignant to a storyline, you need to pick up on that and highlight that, because that is an important moment to drive storylines forward. In a normal conventional sport, those moments are probably less. Because you're calling the action and you're telling the overarching story of that fight. Whereas in wrestling, there's narratives that might date back years or months or this or that. There's so many layers to it. And to add to that, WWE, the style of doing things, that they want you're not supposed to say certain words. You're supposed to refer to things in certain ways. That it's such a precise way of doing it that you're then within these boundaries of that. Yeah, I feel like they may be easing up on that in recent years, which I think's great, because the guys are still doing a wonderful job without those parameters. Yeah. But you're almost like having to think about, hang on, I need to set this up, but I can't say these kind of things. So I think Coach said this, that if you can call WWE, you can call any sport. because I think there's so many parameters you've got to work within when you're calling a WWE
Yeah.
match. That if you can, if you can do that, then you can probably go to another sport and do that.
If you're allowed to say, what are some of the stuff you can't refer to?
I can't things like shot, things like there was a. I don't even know if there's an official. We never got set like an official list. But I was just, I actually can't remember. Like, oh, belt. So it's not a belt. A belt holds your trousers up. It's a title, right?
Right.
Things like that.
Okay.
And I have to dig through my notes from back in the day, but it's certain things like that. It's nothing like untoward. But the belt thing is a big thing because it's not a belt. A belt holds your trousers up. This is a title. This is a championship. And it's those kind of things.
Yeah. The mental gymnastics you must have gone through in your first two shows. Obviously, some of the terminology you would have known anyway because you would have watched the show. But then also,
I would have known it. But as I said, I've watched wrestling for years. But until you start exercising those muscles, and it is a muscle. Commentating, presenting to a certain extent it's a muscle repetition. It's getting into the flow of something, and one of the trickiest things, look, there's so many tricky things for commentary, but one of the things was, I suppose in other sports, you can kind of free flow. You're not trying to second guess what you're saying. You're like, hang on, flurry of strikes, looks for the takedown, and blah, blah, blah. You're not overthinking it. Whereas in WWE, particularly at the start, you do overthink it because you're like, instead of being completely free flowing in your responses, you're like, hang on, I'm about to say this. Is this okay to say? Is this stepping on the toes? Yeah. So it takes a while to kind of get into a place where you've conditioned yourself to instantly not say those words.
Yeah. It's interesting. Would you say that, is there anything that comes to your mind in terms of, because I'm always intrigued, particularly like we're going to go into live TV a bit later on, of like blunders that you think of in your early career where you sit there and go, that was.
Not blunders. We all make mistakes. But I try and live in a moment where it's like,
shit
it's
happens.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, because NXT UK was pre-recorded, there were times when we'd go back and re-record lines. Like, it's a match or something, or we actually wanted to put something else in there. We would go back and redo things.
Yeah.
And, we would have the opportunity as broadcasters, me and Nigel, to watch the show and actually, I want to change this, this, and this. And I, on purpose, unless something was bad, and there's one or two occasions, I can't remember the specifics, but unless it sort of, I think, took away from the match, and I always wanted the match to be as good as possible for the men and women who were taking part of it. Unless I thought it actually really took away from the match, I didn't want to change anything because I wanted to live with it. I wanted to watch those things back. I wanted to call it as live.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to watch those things back, and if I did something that wasn't great or messed up, I was like, well, I need to learn from that. I never wanted to live in a world where I was like, oh man, I can fix it. I can go back and fix it. Because I wanted to condition myself to do it once, and that's it.
Yeah. Because I think there's also an element with that of you're always going to want better. So you're always like, oh, this could be better, this could be better. And you end up in an endless cycle of, we're never going to actually get this done.
Yeah. But I also, and like, I felt that way for sure. But I also wanted to live in a world where it's like, well, don't, like, next time you're calling a match, don't be like, well, I can always redo it. But no, you need to get it right this time.
Yeah.
That's why I want it to be. And that's why I still am now. When I'm doing anything now, I never want to live in a world where I'm like, if I mess up, I'll just go back and re-record it. No, I think having to live with the fumbles, and look, often, other people don't really notice it, but I want to, if I watch it back, be like, you messed up there, and kind of have that with me as I move into the next thing, to be like, let's not do that again.
Yeah. One thing we briefly touched on it earlier, I wanted to get you to dive into was that sort of resurgence of WWE. Like being directly involved with that as someone who loves the sport, but also directly involved. What was that like? Because as I say, it seems particularly, it's now moved over to Netflix as well. It seems to be really kicking off.
Are you a wrestling fan, I'm a wrestling fan.
I have to hold my hands up. No, I didn't. If you said sport-wise, we spoke about sport. I'm definitely a football head when it comes to sports.
So my question is, like, now to move to Netflix, what's your perception of it? Have you watched any bit on Netflix? If not, are you likely to? Are you more engaged?
If anything, I'm more likely now to watch it because it's in my eye line. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll go to Netflix to watch something else, And then because it's in my eye line and I'm one of those people that I'll be intrigued by something and want to learn about it, I'll go, hang on, I've never watched it, but sod it, let's give it a go. Do you know what I mean? I think that's what I'm seeing, a massive power play from WWE with moving on to Netflix, because I think you'll get a lot more mainstream viewership.
So you summed it up perfectly. I think what you said is absolutely spot on. And when I heard the Netflix announcement, I was super excited. I think they're very smart in their strategy, the guys at TK and WWE, because in the States, Raw is on Netflix, and they've kept SmackDown and NXT on mainstream TV, for lack of a better term, so that if you haven't got Netflix or if you just watch TV, you're still going to get exposure to it. I think it's smart for them to spread themselves across. Sometimes you don't want to take yourself away from certain platforms. Yeah. So WWE in their key market, very smart. Now the rest of the world, I can't think what it's like in other countries, but for example, in the UK, TNT Sports was where WWE was for many, many years. I've got to say, as partners, BT Sport for NXT UK were amazing. We did the stuff in the studios. They were great. But we have to accept that BT Sport and TNT, as they are now, are behind a paywall. And I feel like the majority of people who are subscribing to that, and it's not a $4.99, $5.99 subscription. It's I don't know what it is, 20, 30 quid a month. They're football fans. You're paying for that because they're football fans. I'll be frank with you. I don't know how many wrestling fans would solely pay whatever it was to go and watch just for TNT. So it's behind a paywall. Which obviously limits your exposure to the mainstream, to people who aren't going to go and watch it. So as much as I think that they'll miss TNT as a partner, I think from a business standpoint, having the point you made, that stumble across, that I'm watching, I don't know, whatever show you're watching on Netflix right now. Oh, there's WWE. You know what? What's that one, kid? Let me have a look at it. I think it's such a great move. I'll be honest with you that wrestling's hot now, but it's not just a Netflix move. No. It's been getting hotter and hotter and hotter for years.
Because it's one thing, because I'll just call it with ease, my brother-in-law, him and his girlfriend are really into it, but I've seen a massive surge of that, because it seemed to drop. I don't know whether it was just because I wasn't looking for it. It just seemed to tail off, and then suddenly it was back. And it's like, and then since then it's gone from strength to strength.
The business goes in peaks and troughs. It always has, and it probably always will. I get the feeling that it's going to be a while before there's a big trough, because I think definitely now with the acquisition that came through in this TKO merger, these guys are out growth. So I think it's going to be a while before there's a kind of a big trough, and hopefully there won't be a big trough. Firstly, from a business standpoint, I love looking at the business as well of WWE and looking at what they're doing in terms of the branding, in terms of the partnerships, in terms of the collaboration. It's super smart, and you almost now, if you're inside WWE, you're probably like, why haven't we done this before? But also, I just think the storylines. I think COVID was obviously a really shit time for the vast majority of people. But one of the things that came out of it for me as a wrestling fan was, particularly when Roman Reigns came back after he went away for a while, he came back, and because there were no fans there, for the first one thing I'll tell you, as commentators, you're taught that when the superstar's saying something and it's audible on camera, you lay out. Whatever they're saying is more important than what you've got to say. So, of course, if they've got a microphone, you're laying out. But if they're saying something to camera during a match, lay out, because we want to hear what they're saying. That's part of whatever's going on. And that was accentuated massively. Was the Thunderdome those guys were in? The big Thunderdome. The screens of all the rest, with all the fans watching. During that time, obviously, I think they pumped some fan noise in, but you could really hear what they were saying. And I remember watching. It may have happened before this, but it was a Roman Reigns match that stood out to me. It was like watching an elongated fight scene from a movie. Whoever he was fighting was kicking the shit out of him and getting stuck in. But then he was saying these things to the camera, things that wouldn't have stood out so much had there been 20,000 people going mad there. And that was something, conscious or not, I don't know. I'm sure it was, because they're smart guys. That was something that really resonated with me, and it really started to make it feel like a movie. And that, I don't know, that was when, for me, watching the creator really start to spur and build out. And this bloodline narrative that
Yeah.
Roman's been at the front of for years now has just been one of the most enthralling things I've got to see. And that's led on to present day. And I think the creative, I think them building the brand from a business standpoint has been excellent. I think the merger of the UFC. I work in both those worlds, MMA and pro wrestling. There's a lot of crossover in fans, probably more than people would like to admit. I think it's just so smart. I think it's so smart. I think there's been a great reinvigoration of wrestling around the world recently. And back to your original point, the Netflix thing is so smart because you put it out there. People like yourself who are aware of it but might not normally watch it, you might flick something on.
Yeah.
You might enjoy it. Now, that might mean you stick with it, become a huge fan, or it might mean that WWE then, hang on, they're going to come to you in your local town. Like, hey, you know what? I'm going to buy a ticket.
Yeah.
It just makes the brand bigger. It is a brand. It's now, yes, you've got your TV shows. You've got your live events. You've got your big, huge premium live events. You've got merchandise. You've got I remember years ago, someone referred to them as like, look, I think WWE want to be like Marvel. You know, they want to grow out to just like that with these characters. And if you look at it from a business plan, they're kind of headed that way. The size they're cutting. Look, if you told me in 30 years' time there's going to be a WWE land with roller coasters and all that kind of stuff, I'm not going to put it against them. It feels like that's the way they're heading.
I could see it. And as not as an in-depth fan, I can see it. I could see the appeal to it. I could see them pushing for it. Actually, as someone that works in a lot of TV spaces, what do you think of so many things moving over to streaming services? Because there's a very split opinion on it all across the board of like, oh, we're moving so much over to different streaming services, but we're all having to pay for all these different ones. And it's traditional TV's kind of taking a back seat.
Yeah, I think... Again, go back to that WWE model. In their core market, which is America, they put one of their key assets on Netflix. Super smart, and for all the reasons we just talked about. But then they've kept a few things on linear TV. They've done the two, NXT and SmackDown on linear. Yep. I think UFC rights are coming up at the end of this year. UFC with ESPN in the States and TNT in the UK. People are talking about UFC going to Netflix. I definitely think that could be an option. Particularly if WWE is successful in the next 6-12 months, which I'm sure it will be.
Yep.
But then as a company, TKO, are you exposing yourself too much? Let's just say Netflix starts to falter and fail. If you've got all your key assets on that platform and they're not doing very well, that also weakens you. So I would think that perhaps the UFC will go a similar route and put maybe something on a Netflix or an Amazon, and then put some other packages of their content.
But then again, we're seeing the same thing with, if you look at the Premier League, we're seeing the same thing there. Half of the games are streamed on Amazon, half of them are on
and this is a great model, because then people, you have these packages, and some are going to be better than other. Some are going to have the games you want. Some are going to, and people bid, and it just generates more cash flow. Your question about it's us spending more money on stuff. I think it depends what these platforms are. I don't know about you, but we've got Netflix, we've got Amazon. So Netflix we're in on, right? Netflix I'm in. I watch it. Me and Mrs. particularly now we've got just had our second kiddo a few weeks ago. Netflix is where we're at, right? Watch it on Netflix. Amazon, I would say my missus put us on that. I think some of the justification is, most of it is the delivery, parcel stuff, and occasionally there's some stuff you want to watch in it. There is Disney, which we actually got that for our nieces, and now we have it because of a few things. Watching less on there, but we've got it, right? They're the three big ones. So if something comes on there, as with WWE and Netflix, we're having it regardless. So even if that pushed the price up £1 a month or whatever it is, you're probably okay. It's still better. I won't go into all the subscriptions I've got. When I look at them, I'm probably spending a small fortune. Right? And actually probably using
we all are.
Mate, I've got Spotify. I'll be honest with you, it's mainly nursery rhymes.
But
I think TNT, I don't know what it was. Was it £30 a month?
Yep.
I'd mates, I think Sky subscriptions are probably struggling at the moment.
Yeah.
And I had mates. Remember, so I used to work at Sky. I made a lot of content for Sky. And I think I sorted a mate out because I could get friends and family stuff. I think my mate was paying £120 a month for Sky. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I think when I think that business model worked when that was your option. You either had your free view channels and your
Yeah.
5 main channels,
Yeah.
and then if you wanted other content, you got Sky. And I think it worked because I think, let's say you've got a family, if you want to take them all out to the cinema, you're probably spending, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 quid.
Yeah.
And more, right?
Yeah.
So actually getting Sky for 100 or so quid a month, it's a great way to entertain your family.
Yeah.
And it's, but now the world has changed. So we're used to paying, I don't know, I think you can probably still get Netflix for 6, 7 quid.
Yeah. So
20
they're all there or thereabouts. So I think average is out. Probably the highest is probably like £12, I think.
Yeah. So you've got that. And then look, you can spend 30 or 40 quid a month on your subscriptions, right? And yes, for some people that's a lot of money, but still cheaper than where Sky was.
Yeah.
So I think putting sports on these platforms is smart.
Yeah.
I think because it gives exposure. I think again.
Yeah.
I need to look at stats to give you an insight.
Yeah. I'm more asking from someone on the other side of it, being the production as well. You've worked in both sides of it. How has that journey been in there? Because there's
production wise, the people who are producing the content are the people who've always produced the content. Like for example, Amazon is not, yes, they'll have some input, but it's still the same companies who've been producing it. So I think the quality, it will be the same. It'll be the same. They'll want the same. They'll have seen a product like the football games we see on Amazon. They want the same quality, if not better than, the ones
Sky,
we see on BBC.
Yeah.
So they might pump some more money in and get some different hosts or whatever.
Yeah.
But in terms of the production of the game, it's very much the same people doing it. But I do think, go back to the rights thing. I'm intrigued to see where these key rights go over the next 12 months. And I do think sports are brands unto themselves. As we talked about with WWE, it's not just, I'm going to watch this thing and maybe buy a ticket to the event. There's some stuff that goes into it.
Yep.
So building brands is key, and putting yourself in a shop window as Netflix suddenly exposes you to so many more people.
Yeah.
So I think if I'm running a sports franchise right now, I would certainly, and this is no secret, you'd certainly want to be on a Netflix, maybe an Amazon.
Yeah.
It'd be intriguing to see where Disney go. Like PFL, who I've been working with, I think they've probably got I think they're a year behind the UFC with their TV rights, so probably the end of next year. It'd be intriguing to see where they go. And splitting their rights up. Because I think there's definitely a value to being on places like ESPN if you're in the States, because that's where people have it. It's just ingrained into their system. And I think until the landscape has fully evolved, which because it's very much evolving right now, I think you definitely want a presence on normal television. But then can you also take in some Netflix? Can you take in some Amazon? Can you take in some YouTube? Is YouTube going to get in the mix and start doing more and more stuff?
I'm surprised they haven't, to be fair. They haven't really. They've dabbled, but not really done much.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I haven't looked into what they've done. And I mean, they need to. People are making such great content. I know, so sports, there are some sports, if they decide not to go with certain distributors, they will put their stuff on YouTube. So there is sport out on YouTube and stuff, but I don't know if YouTube actually gone all in on a thing yet. That'd be interesting to see, because again, they don't want to get left behind either.
I don't think it will ever go back to mainstream TV. I think we will.
I don't think they've got the money.
No.
I think the dynamics change again. 30 years ago, that's what was the advertising dollar on TV was incredible. I'm talking to some of my colleagues who I work with who are sort of older school producers, and man, like the way TV was 30 years ago was like, it's like, Mad Men and stuff. Like, I've got a colleague who used to fly to the UK from London on Concorde every week to do NFL games. I'm like, man, that's cool,
Yeah.
And of course, there's still loads of money in TV, but people have got to start watching their budgets.
Yeah.
Because the advertising dollar isn't there. People are going to social media and online to advertise.
Yeah.
Streaming services have got the edge on the budget. So a lot of it's going to come down to, can they afford to buy these rights? If Netflix is going to offer them $5 billion over 10 years, it's hard to compete with that.
Yeah, 100%. Especially because they're just going from strength to strength, most of the streaming platforms.
UFC, I think, I saw something the other day. I think UFC are looking to double their rights deal in the next round. Like doubling 100. Yeah, exactly. Sport, this is why I love working in sports. People love sport. And I think these rights deals are,
Fascinating.
I'll
Yeah,
review to
yeah,
that
yeah,
because it shows, you know, I think again with streaming, there's so much like, oh, I'm going to start this Netflix thing tonight. I might watch it tonight. You might watch it tomorrow night. There's very few appointment to view
yeah,
things out there
yeah,
apart from sport.
yeah,
Apart from sport, because yeah, look, you and me could be watching the same series at home, and I'm an episode behind me. Don't tell me what happened in the next episode, whatever. But we'll get to there at the same time. Whereas sport, the football game, the boxing match, the MMA fight,
yeah,
if you haven't watched it, you're screwed. Like I will, if I don't step for something, I will literally wake up. I will not look at my phone. I will make sure my watch is off, and I go and watch it straight away. I don't engage with anyone outside my house because I don't want to miss it. You know, so but you're not going to do that with a series, are you?
Although, having said that, one of the worst things with the streaming services doing sports is it's often a delay. So the amount of times I'll see something, someone I'm sitting watching the game with, they've just scored. Shit, that hasn't come up yet.
Yes. Yes, I agree with that, and that's sometimes why it's good to not have the old the phone app where you're watching those things. Those 30-second delays, the 30-second delays can absolutely kill you,
and it ruins the magic because you're like, oh, they've just scored. Oh, okay.
yeah. That's why if I'm watching something like that, phone's down.
What about, we've spoken a lot about WWE. As I mentioned to you before we start recording, I'm loving hearing people's stories where they've transitioned from one major industry into another. Now, obviously, they're both very much connected, as you've already said, but I'm intrigued by someone going from an area that they love into another area they love. But listening to your story, I would have said WWE was pipping the post a bit. What made the transition to UFC and cage fighting and all of that come about?
Yeah, I mean, so I got the call from Bama, and that was my first exposure to MMA, and then I was working with him, and then I work. So people may not know, but I have done and still do on occasion work with the UFC, predominantly behind the camera. So I was working with Bama, so I was getting really kind of becoming ingrained into the world of MMA. And then I actually reached out to the UFC and got to talk to some people there. And I got brought in, primarily because I was someone with mixed martial arts experience, but I was also a producer. So for many years, I was part of the team that made the documentaries of UFC fighters. So I would go, it was mainly for the sort of European UFC cards. So I would get sent to Sweden, to, I don't know, wherever these fighters were. And I'd go and spend days with these fighters charting their journeys for content. So, that I've been privileged to get really ingrained into the mixed martial arts world. And then obviously I went to WWE and did that. Meanwhile, I was still working with UFC at the time. And then it was kind of fortunate that a couple of years ago, another company called PFL, who are, I mean, since I started working with them, they've grown up exponentially, but they're doing very well then. A lot of actually ex-WWE people work at PFL. It's the same ecosystem of people. Anyway, I got brought in to do some of their European shows, and then they, like WWE, launched the European brand the following year, which I did. And then from that, they brought me to do their global series on ESPN. And then this year I started calling the fights for their Middle Eastern brand. Again, it's the transition was a strange one. It's just an opportune moment. Lillian Garcia was their cage announcer at the time, and she got sick. And then someone who knew me from WWE, we were talking, they brought me in. So it's, again, a very similar thing, right place, right time. And that's opened up a lot of opportunities for me. And the guys at PFL are great. I get to work with a wonderful team of people. Like there's George Greenberg, the exec over there, Sean O'Connell, their play-by-play guy, who I love to pieces, Dan Hardy, Randy Couture, Brett Okamoto. I mean, the crew there is just, it's a privilege to go to work. I mean, I'll get off these long old flights, and it doesn't feel like I'm going to work. I feel like I'm going to go just hang out with my mates, which is basically what I'm doing. But yeah, that transition, it feels very much the same. The industry's the same. The industry, like the people you get to connect with and work with. And it is funny, actually. The longer you stay in this industry, I'm sure it's like other ones. You're meeting the same people. Everyone does this. All independent contractors. You're all moving from gig to gig. So I'm privileged to get to work with cool people in front of and behind the camera. I get to work them on a bunch of different things. Like there's a show I did last year called, was it last year? I think, no, year before maybe, called Kingpin, an influencer boxing thing. And it's funny, a lot of the crew from that are the same crew I'd find on a PFL event and so forth. So it's a nice ecosystem of people. In terms of working with the sport, I'm privileged now that, before BAMA, I'd watched UFC and MMA. I didn't know a lot about it, but over the last 10 years, it's a passion. I've not only the people I get to work with in terms of career and stuff, but, I've again, it's a privilege. I've been around some of these fighters' whole careers. I get to be with them. I get to see them come up. There's a guy called Brad Pickett, who's a legend in the UK scene. I got to film his retirement documentary, and now I get to go to his gym on occasions and film his current fighters. Tom Aspinall, who's UFC interim heavyweight champion, probably one of the greatest fighters on the planet right now. One of his first fights was on BAMA when I was starting out. So our careers have kind of gone,
not similar parts. Similar, yeah.
Well, yeah. No, I'm not UFC heavyweight champion yet, but it's wonderful to be at a point now where people's careers are blossoming and you're really seeing the hard work pay off, and to have been along for that ride and to have covered it in a certain way. It's a privilege.
How does it differ in that world compared to WWE? Because it's a lot more. What my understanding is it's a lot more live. So does that feed? Yeah. Does it feed that chaos monster side you of going? Actually, this is a bit more it.
They are two different things, aren't they? Like, so one of them is 100% competitive sport, which is MMA and boxing and all those things. And there's something to that where no one knows what's going to happen. Yeah. And it's beautiful. It's raw passion sport. And as much as I do work in other sports, and that's something that this year is going to do, you're going to see me in a few outside of combat sports. The beautiful thing about combat sports is it's so primal. All of us, and I think particularly guys, as much I'm definitely not a fighter. I'm barely a lover. I'm definitely not a fighter. But there's something inside of us that thinks, I've had to stick up for my missus or whatever. You can do it. There's always something. We talked about living vicariously through someone as a kid. I think as adults, a lot of men live vicariously through athletes, particularly combat sport athletes. Yeah. Oh yeah, I could have done that. I could have knocked him out. We all think about it at some point.
Shut up, Dave.
There's something beautiful about watching that live and the unpredictability. And it's amazing. With WWE, it's as much as it's competitive in a different way. There's a lot of competition in terms of, you want to be the best. Yeah. But it's made theatre. WWE and pro wrestling is theatre. And it's the most beautiful thing. And I think that one of the big differences is if I'm at a WWE show, the days are long because I'm there, we're there early because there's rehearsals. They're going through things. A lot of it's for safety. Just like, are we going to do this? Are we do that? And a thing that's great about this new WWE regime is on social media, you're getting glimpses of that. If you go on WWE socials, you'll see Hunter stepping through someone's entrance, stepping through how he thinks he wants someone to present to the camera. And that's the stuff that when I first saw that, when I first started working with the company, oh man, I loved it. Because finally now I'm understanding all these things I'd seen and kind of taken for granted, just what happened. No, there's method to that madness. And it gave me such a whole new appreciation for it. So WWE, when you're there for a show day, all those things are happening. When you're there for a boxing match or mixed martial arts event, it's more, right, have they got the cameras up, is everything working? Are these VTs working? They're kind of two different days. Flipping back to WWE, one of the most spectacular things for me is, when you're sitting ringside, seeing this stuff unfold. And I'll give you an example. It was a takeover, an NXT UK takeover. And I think it might have been a triple threat tag match or something, but it was Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster and Gallus. They were involved in this thing. So I think the spot was supposed to be two ladders set up outside the ring with tables laid out. And the boys, Mark and Flash, were supposed to climb the ladders, I believe, and jump off and hit the Gallus boys through tables. Do it at the same time. Yeah. Now, as they laid on one of the boys from Gallus on a table, I think the table broke. Or something happened, or a ladder broke. Anyway, these boys were suddenly left with one ladder. And they got, I think the producer told them, through the referee, both come off the same ladder. You're in front of thousands of people live,
Yeah.
live TV.
Yeah.
This is a big event, people watching. And these guys, like, if this was Hollywood and this was a stunt, if this had happened,
Yeah.
right, guys, step down. We need like 3 or 4 hours to reset this, check that, make sure it's all good. No, man, these guys, these guys hadn't even stood on the ladder together, which is a whole different thing. All these things that you don't even think about as a fan. You're like, hang on a minute. So these guys are going to jump off a ladder each, which is bad enough. That's a big old thing.
Yeah.
But now they're being told in the heat of the moment, either climb up the ladder and I think come off together onto this thing. And the ladders are small. Just that, man. And it's sitting there and also just understanding that there's been a whoopsie, but they're making this thing work. But what those guys are the athletes are having to do, and to do it safely for them, I sit there and I can't understand how they're doing it. I know these guys, and I can't understand how they can do some of the things they do, and I have such admiration for them.
It's that ability to adapt, isn't it? Just some athletes just have that way of, we'll just do this then. But I'd say it's also having the freedom in the space to be able to do that, because as we've said, Hollywood's a health and safety nightmare. No, we got to do this.
Exactly. But I just, man. So traditional combat sport it's beautiful. Anything can happen. Whereas when I'm watching pro wrestling, I just love the theatre. I just love the storytelling. I love, look, we've all watched boxing matches or MMA fights, and we can say this is boring, this is crap, I don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
In pro wrestling, they're always trying to tell you a story. They're always trying to do something, and they're always trying to manipulate your emotions up and down that roller coaster. It's man, I love it.
What about what's been your biggest career highlight? Combining both. What's been the biggest? That was really cool.
I suppose one kind of stands out, but it's not MMA or pro wrestling. I suppose a big moment for me was one of the David Hay fights. So David was he came back and he had a free to air deal with Dave, the TV channel Dave. And again, we go back to our other conversation. I think that was very smart, because putting yourself on free to air up bigs your brand up.
Yeah,
exactly. So that when he, 2 or 3 fights later, he went to fight Tony Bellew, his stock was raised because he's had this massive free to air viewership. A lot of times, at the time, there's a lot of criticism. They're like, you're on a comedy channel, Dave. But I'm like, well, man, sorry. First of all, you're the boxing fans who are saying this. Yeah. You've not got to pay to watch this. This is free, right?
Yeah.
It's, I don't know. I have no idea what the problem is. But that's a whole different conversation. But, it was when I was working on one of those, and we knew there was going to be multiple million people watching. I think, I can't remember, it was 2.5 million people, I think, were going to tune in. And that was, that's, I hadn't done anything like that. And I remember sort of just trying to process that and think how I was going to approach it. And that's a moment that stands out for me because, David had fought so hard for me to be on that broadcast team. It was a big moment for me. So if standing there and knowing that millions of people were watching, with WWE, you don't know how many people are watching. There's a lot, don't get me wrong. But is it, especially when you're on WWE Network or you're on TNT, it could be a couple 100,000, eventually it could be a couple of million, who knows? But you're never sure. Yeah. And it's also an incremental, pickups. With this, it was live, and you knew that many people are watching. And that was a point I had to sort of have a little word with myself in my head and figure a few things out. But that's a moment that has, and I think always will stand out for me, as a big moment, being in the O2, standing there talking on camera, knowing that there's a shitload of people watching. Yeah,
definitely my bottle would be, I would have lost my bottle, I think. But I think as well, what's interesting is, do you think there's an element of, because I know David was quite a big part of your journey. Yeah. Do you think that was also the connection to it, because it was almost that personal connection as well?
I don't know about that. I mean, obviously I felt like I wanted to do a good job because he had been so good to me and I consider him a friend and so forth. But no, I think it was realizing that this was the biggest thing I've done at that point. It was a big old step up from hosting Bama and getting several 100,000 to suddenly being now we're getting multi-millions. But it's that's always a moment that kind of sticks in my head, because that's the first time I had to have a little word with myself and be like, right, okay,
we're doing well. No,
it wasn't even doing well. It was more just mentally, because you're I think it's very easy if you suddenly think, Jesus, there's
A lot of people.
how many people watching
Yeah.
me, how do I process this in my brain to get through it without fucking up? That was the conversation in my head.
To be honest, I think anyone would go through that of like, as I say, because I think as well, whenever you're dealing with anything like TV, if things go wrong, depending on the situation you're in, there's not always somewhere to hide.
I think so on that broadcast, things did go wrong. Loads of things went wrong. It was pretty car crash at points, but it's it's not overthink it and rolling with the punches.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think the thought I had was like, how do I get through this? And what I said to myself was, don't be. You haven't got to be perfect. You haven't got to be perfect. And I think if we're going into those situations, be like, you need to be perfect. You set yourself up to fail, because then as if something does go wrong, whether it's you messing up or production's messed up and whatever, if you're trying to be perfect and suddenly that's taken away from you, you're going to overthink that.
Yeah.
And you're going to start to make things even worse. And then you're going to really mess up. So my mindset was, right, if I'm watching TV, now if a host's bad, okay, they stand out.
Yeah.
Right? And if a host's really good, and hosts who are really good, a lot of time they've built up sort of fan equity because, you've got, we all love people like Ant and Dec because they, first of all, they're amazing at what they do, but also they've built up this kind of rapport with us over years, right? So you love them. Yeah. Now, if a host is doing their job and linking things together, being entertaining, keeping it energized, great. Yeah. Right? So that's kind of middle of the ground. I was like, right. So in my head, I was like, okay, don't try and be perfect. Don't try and be the best presenter in the world, because you're not going to be that, and you're going to fuck it up, and it's going to fall flat on your face. Just try and be adequate. I'd hosted live TV before. I'd hosted banners and stuff, and I was like, look, I think I can do this, right? I've just got to deliver what I know I can do. Yeah. So do that, and you'll be adequate, and not completely shit. And then once you're being adequate, you can try and be a bit better, So that's what no one, just be adequate and do the job, and you're going to get away with it. And then off the back of that, try and be as wonderful as you can be. But take the pressure off of trying to be perfect. That's the thought I had in my head, because I was like, there's millions of people watching. I'm setting myself up for a fail. And I think that's a mindset that's kept with me ever since, that you're working in live TV, you're always going to mess up. So don't hang your hat on being perfect, because what's going to happen is something will mess up. Yeah. And if you're thinking about that, you're going to mess up more stuff.
Is that stick to the basics, get the basics right, and then build from there?
Get the basics right, and then try and add as much on top as you possibly can.
Is there anything that sticks in your mind of like one moment where things didn't quite go to plan that sticks in your mind?
Yeah. Floyd Mayweather fight against Deji. So I was in Dubai, and I was hosting this Floyd Mayweather versus Deji, KSI's brother, and it was a big old thing on social media. Like we know about the success of crossover boxing, and this was a big moment, particularly because it was Floyd Mayweather. Yeah, a lot of money was being poured into it. We'd done media tours. A lot had happened. I got there to the arena, and I knew from the moment I got there it was going to be a bit of a struggle of a night. Just the way certain things were set up. For example, I got to the presenting spot, and I said, where are the lights? Because normally we have like big panel lights to light you, just so it's clear. Yeah. Where are the lights, guys? Oh, we're going to light you from the roof. What?
Right.
Oh, we're going to light you from the ceiling. I was like, okay, can we take a look at it? Like, I'm happy to have a look at it, but I just don't know. Anyway, it looked awful. Cut to the chase. 2 minutes before about to go live on air, they were running around. They had some lights on. Yeah, you couldn't even see us on camera. You couldn't even see us on camera. We're about to go into a pay-per-view fight on DAZN, and it was a struggle. We got there. We got some lights. I think a photographer lent us some lights, and we got it set up. And,
my anxiety would have been all over the shop.
But that was fine. That's fine, because ultimately that's out of my control. Yeah. And I did whatever I could. So we got up and running. We're good. We got through the evening. It was all over the place, but we got through it. It was wonderful. And then there's a Tommy Fury fight, and he kicked off with Jake Paul, and that was a nice little thing. And then someone told me, right, we've probably got about 15 minutes until Floyd and Deji come out, so you're going to have to film. Great, not a problem. That's great. I said to one of the producers who was in there, like, look, do me a favor. can you load some stuff into the van? Like, I know they've made loads of little documentaries and stuff on YouTube. Pull those in and pop them into the EVS, like the playback system. So we've got, in case this thing goes really long, and they're like, we can't. The system's really old and bad. We can't put any. There's nothing to play in. I was like, okay, cool. So to cut to the chase, I ended up talking for, I think it was an hour and 15 or an hour and a half.
Jesus.
I will claim, and I claim publicly, the unofficial world record for filling on live TV, because I filled for well over an hour, because there were no commercial breaks.
Yep.
There were no VTs to play in. People, they just kept bringing different people they could find to stand with me and talk. I was also going out to the entire arena of 10,000, 15,000 people at the same time. So everyone could hear what's...
Yeah.
This is not like a private moment with me and... Well, private. It's not just me and the TV. It's me and everyone in this entire room.
Jesus.
For close to an hour and a half of just talking. At the same time, no one's talking to me in my ears. Like, I have...
Yeah.
Normally someone will be like, right, this is what's happening.
Yep.
Just giving you little iggies, like what's happening.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, there was nothing in my ears. So for the best part of an hour and a half, I stood there just talking.
God.
Just talking.
And what were the conversations like afterwards? Because I'd be sitting there with like the team going, what the fuck was that?
I don't think there were many, because I think there's so many other things that were crazy going on. I think it was also one of those moments where, like, obviously everyone's fighting their own battles.
Yeah.
My battle at that point is to keep this show going.
Yep.
And to make it as entertaining and seamless as possible. If you're watching this, basically, if you're watching that, I want you to feel like this is supposed to be an hour and a half conversation.
It's fair. If you've nailed that though, that's quite an artful. That's what I love. That's what I love about live TV. Yeah,
there was something about me that sickeningly loved that, because it was like, this is a challenge.
Yeah,
hosting TV. If like, okay, coming up next is this. Let me ask you 2 questions about this thing. Great, here's the next fight. Yeah. That's great. That's fun. It's okay. There's only so much challenge there.
Yeah,
the challenge comes in these moments where things go off the rails, and I love it. I talked at the start of this conversation about I love the mechanics of a live broadcast.
Yeah.
It's things like that. It's things like, okay, something's happening. Yeah. I need to somehow keep this on the rails. How am I doing that? I don't know. Let's figure this out in real time. And you get to be with me. And the game is, I'm trying to not let you understand or see that this is off the rails. I mean, that thing was off. There were no rails at that point.
Yeah.
That thing was just going for gold.
Yeah.
But it was honestly, there's a sick part of me that loved it. I mean, if people go on my Instagram and scroll back a while, there's like a little video that shows it, just like a speed up version, and it's just chaos. I mean, luckily I had some great people to talk to, and we kept talking. But I'd literally suddenly find like someone else being pushed into stand next to me. And I was like, are people just walking over like, what's happening here? And I'm still not fully clued up if it was them or the production that was bringing them in. Adil Adipo and Wade. I don't know if they were just bringing themselves in because they could see, right, we need to fresh this up and get that other guest out and get this person in. I don't know. But either way, it was as a live broadcaster, I love that stuff, man. But yeah, that's one of those moments where things went off the rails. And yeah, that sticks with me.
And on that note of things going slightly off the rails, I'm going to ask you the last question that we ask every guest, which is, what's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with?
Well, I don't know how politically correct or incorrect this thing is, but I'm British.
Yep.
My partner's Australian.
Right.
And I prefer Vegemite to Marmite.
Oh, that's controversial.
Have you tried them?
No, I can't knock it till I try it. That's controversial.
Honestly, Marmite, not keen. Vegemite, I can't do that. If I could, it's banging.
What's the difference? What's the difference?
Vegemite's not so tart. It's a bit easier on the palate. It's a bit easy to spread. It's not like Vegemite, Marmite. Whenever I got it, it looks like tar.
Yeah.
Vegemite's like everything. Everything's sexier in Australia, all right? The weather's sexier, the people, because they're always half naked in Australia. Everything's a bit sexy in Australia. Vegemite's the sexy version of Marmite.
Right, that's definitely getting clips.
There's an idea for someone on an OnlyFans account. I'm just saying, the sexy version of
the sexy version of Marmite. You either love it or hate it. And on that note, thank you so much for coming on, Andy. It's been a great conversation. Obviously, we'll link all Andy's details below as well, in case you want to check him out. And also, I'm sure if you got any,
check out my newly launched OnlyFans. It's coming later tonight. It's Vegemite versus Marmite. Love it or hate it. I'll be doing those personal requests and stuff. So yeah, I'll see you there.
Love it. But thank you so much for coming on,
Charlie. Thank you, mate. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Not Quite Podcast. Please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram to get regular updates about the podcast.